All the thought leaders and politicians tend to say that the future is in our kids, or that our kids are our future. But at the same time, when we look at how we're raising our kids, do you ever wonder that are they the future? And is our parenting and educational system set up to fail the next generation? Many people think so. And often when you hear people talk about what should we do instead as a way to do better, the Nordic countries are referred to as a better way to do things. The Finnish educational system, or babies sleeping outside in a crib in Stockholm. I'm originally from Finland. I grew up in Finland. I am married to an American. We have 3 kids, and we split our time between the US and Finland. And in this video, I'm gonna talk about the differences between raising kids in Europe, particularly in the Nordic countries, and raising kids in America, and what can we learn from both systems. And hi, if you're new to the channel, my name is Tero. I am a mushroom-loving entrepreneur, originally from Finland. I'm a family farmer. I'm a dad of 3 kids, and I've started some companies, including Sigmatic, which is one of the leaders in mushroom-based wellness products. And more specifically, I currently live in Austin, Texas most of the year. In the wintertime and summers, we spend at our family farm in Finland. And I've been exposed to both parenting methods in the US and North America versus Northern Europe, particularly Finland. And being between these 2 worlds of North America and Europe, it's been fun to see benefits of both. Generally, if you listen to people online, they're gonna shit on the American way of doing things. American kids are fat, dumb, and poorly behaved, and European kids are sophisticated, smart, and healthy.
No, that's not how she can do it in our family. She's act like she's the queen and we're the sorry people.
And that might not be the full story, by the way, but in this video, I'm going to talk about what I think is amazing about the European, particularly Northern European way of raising kids, and what are some good things about American way of raising kids and how they differ. And if you're European, what to learn from Americans, and if you're an American, what to learn from Europeans. The first thing that people ask me when it comes to kids and parenting is the parental leave. You might have heard that in a lot of European countries, including like Finland, you get an extended maternity leave, and there's no one amount because it comes in different phases and how much of your salary the government or your employer is paying. But it tends to be that people are having a maternity leave somewhere between 6 and maybe even 24 months. The longer it is, the less you get paid. That's the short and sweet end of it. But there's also a paternity leave, so the parents can decide how they split the time. So while the mom is usually much longer in the family leave, some of that leave can be used by the dad, and pretty much the dad gets something at least to have a relationship with the kid and also support and help with the family. And I think this is an amazing thing. I think one of the biggest mistakes Americans do is that they rush back to work. They schedule a C-section on Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. and they want to be home at 3:30 and to join a Zoom call. And I don't think that's great. As a family, as our kids were all born in US, we followed the first 40 days method. There's a few different names for it, and different sub-indigenous cultures around the world have been using it, but basically means that for the first little over a month, the mom takes it easy. It doesn't work out. Someone else does cooking and cleaning so they can really rest. At the end of the day, the organs were pushed up and then dropped down, and there's a lot of rejuvenation that needs to happen, but also connecting with the new baby. And breastfeeding is a lot of work. You burn a lot of calories, you need a lot of nutrients. So giving the mom time to rest and then adjusting to the new life. And I think Americans rush back to work way too fast. Because Europeans tend to have a longer maternity leave and parental leave, they also tend to go to daycare later. Often daycare is paid by the government, which is another awesome thing. In Finland, for example, you are guaranteed free daycare wherever you live. So the government has to, in one way or the other, offer you a daycare service. Here in America, I've seen kids as young as like 6 weeks or 8 weeks go to daycare, which to me is gnarly. But also, people go to school earlier. My 2- and 3-year-olds are going to school, which is, you could argue, is a school. It's a Montessori school, but it's really a glorified daycare. versus I didn't really start studying until I was 7 years old, and we didn't get grades until I think I was 11. So we didn't even get graded the first few years of our schooling. It's really just about playing and socializing, which I think is beautiful and very valuable. Versus in America, you're expected sometimes to like learn how to read and write before you even go to school. There's all these extracurricular activities that put a lot of pressure on kids. And Finnish schooling system has been ranked very high for the last few decades in the PISA rankings. For a long time, it was the #1 educational system in the world. And you had the least amount of school out of the comparable countries. So you would spend the least amount in school, least amount learning, and you still had better scores in math, reading, writing, because I think the kids had an opportunity to be kids. Here, if you now look at especially the current young generation, they already look like adults at 13 with makeup and how they dressed and how they behave and how they act, instead of letting kids be kids. And I think that's another positive benefit of the European system. Another thing that Europeans, I think, get right is that they have the kid to adjust to the family's life instead of the whole family adjusting the kid's life. In America, it's often the whole family, the parents in particular, adjust their life and hobbies and things to the kid's current life. And in Europe, people try to do all the same things. They like to go out, have a dinner, have some wine, go skiing, holidays, travel, socialize, invite friends over. And then the kids adjusted that life instead of the parents adjusting the kids' life. Now, obviously, it's not black and white either way, but I think it's a better system where you involve the kids into daily chores, for example. If you're interested in the topic, there's an amazing and popular book called Raising Up Baby. Raising Up Baby. Baby, like baby in French. And then there's another one called Hunter-Gatherer Parent that talks about how indigenous cultures around the world raise their kids and why they're so calm and so well behaved socially. Obviously, part of that is probably lack of screen time, SpongeBob and whatnot. But the other part is that they're active in daily chores like cleaning up the house, filling up the dishwasher, or doing laundry. Now, they might be slow, and as a parent, you'll be like, oh, I can do the same thing faster myself, but it's part of the educational process of including the child into your life and letting them kind of slowly do it. There will be usually calmer and kinder and more engaged as kids anyway. One thing that particularly Nordic people do is that they don't care about the weather. Maybe if you're from Michigan or Midwest, you'll feel the same. But in Finland, you go outside in nature every day of the year, whatever the weather is. Like, it has to be like -30 degrees for you to have a snow day. Like, having snow is not a snow day because there's snow for like many months in a row. So it needs to be like a gnarly weather storm for you to actually not go to school. And I think that's good. Like, you're outside a lot more, you get used to it, your immunity probably gets better. Even as newborns in Finland, Sweden, Denmark, I think Norway too, you will put the kid in a stroller outside, even if it's like 0 degrees. You just put a warm blanket, put them outside. They sleep really well. They get fresh air, and the parents go inside to have coffee and socialized and have adult friends while their kid sleeps in a stroller on the street. And this is very funny to a lot of Americans. But it's another way how the kids adjust to the family's life versus the family adjusting the kid's life, and also a way to have the kids be healthier and more engaged. There's a lot of things that I think American systems do really well, and I think those are things that if I would raise our kids in Europe most of the year, I would still want to engage them in these things that I mentioned. And one of the things that I think Americans do really well is social activities. So a lot of American kids are really good at expressing themselves, and they have a lot of social activities, particularly when they're past the toddler phase, like a lot of hobbies. Now, that's almost the downside that I mentioned about Americans expecting their kids to be adults faster by engaging them in all these competitive sports really early on. But the benefit of that is that they're being very active. You know, the soccer mom stereotype has benefits of them having a big social group, versus when I was raised, there was like a lot less opportunities for that. And a lot of parents would have their kids at home or in just their neighborhood only, versus Americans are very active in engaging kids in social activities. Americans are also good at building the confidence of kids. I feel like every American child or teenager especially thinks they're amazing. That's why TV shows like America's Got Talent or X Factor or whatever they're called are pretty funny, because everybody going there, even if they don't know how to sing at all, they've been told their whole life that they're great at singing, and then they go and a professional says you suck. But it's because these kids have been told since they're young that they're awesome. The Americans are very optimistic, positive, encouraging for their children. The other thing that I think Americans do well, which in a way is also a negative, is the educational system. And hear me out, because this is both a pro and a con. In Europe, generally, the public education is a lot better. So the quality of an average public school in Europe is a lot higher than probably an average public school in America. There's obviously certain regions that are usually higher income oriented regions that have amazing public schools. Like here in Austin, Texas, there's the Ean School District, and that's where a lot of rich people live. And because the school district is so good, people want to move in there. And because people want to move in there, real estate starts to get pretty expensive, but they have great public schools. But a lot of people put their kids into private schools. And that's how like the whole system is built. Now people have higher income than in Europe. And I don't think this is generally a good thing, because certain people are left behind. But in America, there's a lot more choices. Even if you live in a smaller town, there's a lot of different opportunities between Waldorf and Montessori and Reggio Emilia and different alternative schooling methods. Also, homeschooling and world schooling is a lot easier and more common than it can be in Europe. Europe, you're put into your public school, love it or not. In my case, for example, I was put into this environmental school that my great-granddad helped found, and there was a lot of bullying in that school. My middle school and high school were also known for violence. There was some of the most violent schools in all of Finland. There was a lot of fighting. I didn't really have a choice. You're legally almost forced to be at that school, and that's like technically your only choice. Versus in America, there's a lot of choices. If this one schooling doesn't work, you can go somewhere else. If that one schooling methodology doesn't work for your kid, you can go to another school. I guess this also goes for hobbies. In America, you have a lot more hobbies, a lot more opportunities to do new languages and new things, versus Europe, you usually have a few things within your region that is accessible. And unless you live in a couple of the bigger metropolitan areas, you choose within that small pool, versus in America, you have a huge pool of options to choose from. And another thing that I think Americans do better is that they're more open-minded to different kinds of forms of parenting and different kinds of decisions as parents you might do, anywhere from home birth, where I've done a video about that, to also things like how you choose to raise your kids and different alternative paths. Versus in Europe, maybe the average path is better, and Europe is generally more multicultural. There's many languages, many subcultures, but Europeans tend to be more conservative and traditional. And it's like this one path or two path options you have, and you choose between those two options. Versus in America, kids have a lot more opportunities to express themselves, do things. And I think kids benefit from that, because not every path is the same for every kid. So that's why I think America gives kids more opportunities. Now, the negative of that is that if you don't find your path, or your parents or your community isn't supporting that, for you to discover that, then you might get left behind more than in Europe. But in general, I think Americans, you have more options for not just hobbies and education, but generally choices in life. The culture and community is more encouraging. Now, things that I think are true for both, as in negatives, is that I think the food culture in both Europe and in America for young people is pretty alarming. A lot of people eat processed food or ultra processed foods. Maybe Americans eat them a little more, but I don't think Europe is much better. And in general, I would be alarmed of the dietary choices of a lot of kids in both cultures. So I think that's a concern if you're living in Europe or in America, and that's something I would put a lot of effort on in both cases. The other one is screen time or lack of nature time. Now, you could argue that like people like me who grew up on a farm would spend more time, but I would say the same. If you grew up on a farm in the Midwest, you probably spend a lot of time outdoors as well. In both cases, I think kids are too much on their phones and screens and not enough in nature. I think that is equally true for both. So the idea of calling Americans fat and stupid and lazy, the same truth can be said for certain subsets of the European culture. I don't think kids are stupid, but a lot of their effort, especially if they're a lot on their screens, is they're smart in totally other areas of life. And you could argue that those areas of life are not that helpful if you know TikTok dances and cultural phenomena and games and things like that. There's other benefits of those, but that's why I think a lot of people see American kids, but also European kids, as fat and stupid because of the poor dietary choices, excess screen time, not enough in nature, not enough practical skills. And I think that's a global phenomenon, not just an American thing. That's my experience. My kids are still very young. They're all sub 4 years old. So I'm obviously curious to see how things go as they go to real school at some point. I also hope to world school them at some point for a couple of years and travel around the world and give them exposure to other cultures. So I'm sure to make more videos later on the pros and cons of different parenting methods, some things we've learned along the way. But growing up in Finland, now having an American wife and kids born in America, I can see the value of both societies. And I think that's a real blessing to be able to cherry pick the benefits of different parts of different cultures around the world. And I hope to do that later also by living in Asia and Africa and other places. So my kids have access to different systems and their systems, pros and cons, and take the best parts from different things to forge their own lives forward. So hopefully this video was helpful. If you disagree with anything, leave a comment. I'm not going to be offended. If you like it, subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up button, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.